perfections of the Bodhisattva. Like we talked last week, I think probably last week I gave a brief kind of overview of the previous stages of the path, because as I mentioned, this is the most advanced stages. These 6 practices, if we're thinking about a person who's actually achieving these steps, these 6 practices are the culmination of the path of the Bodhisattva once they've achieved bodhicitta. And then that's the compassion wing, and then before that, that's like the most advanced level of the Lam Rim. But we're in the stages like, the great scope, as they call it, or I call it university. And before that, of course, you have to have the lower scope and the middle scope, which is the wisdom wing, which is the nuts and bolts of the Buddha's path of abiding by the laws of karma and learning to give up attachment. These are the first stages of practice. These are all the qualifications for a person to get to actually accomplish these 6 perfections. So, of course, as we read them, all we can do is do them according to the level of capacity. This is where it's important. It's important to remember. It's important to understand. That's why they call it the stages of the path. It's kind of incremental. It's gradual. Even though we know it as Buddhists, we know it. We've heard these things 1,000 times. It's blah blah blah. Gradual path. First, the lower scope, then middle scope, then great scope. Even though we've been thinking of this for a long time, it's still hard for us to understand how, for example, compassion is more advanced than understanding your attachment. Because when we read everything, we read it at the level we're at, which means we give it all equal status, But if we really think about it and we really look at the practices of the Bodhisattva, then we'll understand. So, for example, even before you get to the 6 perfections, the whole developing of bodhicitta, this insane, radical state of mind, that would be considered mental illness, if in ordinary psychology. When you really hear deeply the practices that you need to do and accomplish before you even get bodhicitta, if you're actually talking about being a genuine yogi, before you actually get to the 6 perfections, it's so advanced, it's like a joke, So that's why in these classes, even though we're going to be talking about the 6 perfections, which we've been doing, I want to just bring in the different practices that we need to do in order to get bodhicitta, which really do show us how advanced these practices are. But nevertheless, we can still practice them according to our capacity. What else can you do, if you're playing music, if you're practicing music, right now we're sort of doing the equivalent of, the most advanced levels of music. But obviously we can listen to the teachings about patience, perseverance, blah blah blah, and do it at our level. Whereas if you're only in grade 1 music and you can't even begin to attempt grade 12, that. You can still look at it and you can try, but here it seems not as if there's such a gap, but there is immense, gap between the levels of capability of the disciple. Rinpoche, he spells it out, that the first level of practice, the first stages of the wisdom wing, abiding by the laws of karma, controlling your body and speech, as he says, it's the practices and teachings suitable to the disciple of the least capability. Well, that's a fancy way of saying junior school. I use it very casually like that, because it conveys something to us. So let's now. I think last week we got us. I don't know. We went in the back. We looked at the earlier stages, and we started on the 6 perfections, and maybe we got to what? Do you remember, Andrew? Which one did we get to? Were we into perseverance yet, or were we still at patience, or what? Do you remember? Any memory of it? Anybody? Can't hear you, Andrew. No sound coming out of your mouth.
Patience.
We got to patience, did we? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so good. But let me just now go back. Let's go back to the stages of the path before the 6 perfections, where you where we have to practice in order to accomplish bodhicitta. So this is really this is like the 8 verses of mind training, as it's called. One of these really intense, but seemingly simple, very simple. The Lamas always teach on it, and you can teach it on a very simple level. But if you really look at it, analyze it, it's really quite shocking, So let's look at these 8 verses. I'll just say them casually. It doesn't matter if we don't have them in front of us. I've got a rough idea of each of the verses, So the whole point of these verses, they're by this person called Langri Tangpa, a great scholar, a disciple, I think, of Dromtompa, who was one of the main disciples of Atisha. And it was Atisha in India, back in Tibet, in the 11th, whatever it was, century, 12th century, who came from India, spent the last years of his life in Tibet. He was a product of this amazing Nalanda monastic university system, which is the system that carried on unbroken into Tibet, and that's still existing now, even in exile. His Holiness always says we are of the Nalanda tradition. So Atisha, like all these great scholars and yogis and saints, was educated there. And he spent many years in Sumatra, in Indonesia, where it was actually Vajrayana was flourishing. If you go there now, you're going to see all these, that massive big building they've got in Borobudur, that is the United Nations kind of keeps it up. And it's this vast mandala. It's Vajrayana, and then a couple of hours away we went there when I went there years ago to do a pilgrimage. There's this big place near, not in Sumatra, even in Java. And these big, these Vajrayana temples, no Buddhists living there. They're all Muslims now, I think. But it's very interesting how it was flourishing in the Vajrayana way back. And so I think Atisha spent 11 years there with his guru Salingpa, from whom he received, I'm not so sure, I'm not very good at history, I'm sorry. I think where he received many of these teachings about bodhicitta. In particular, the particular approach in achieving bodhicitta, which is called exchanging self for others, these radical practices, which are the favorites of all the great Tibetan masters, And so this particular verse, this series of verses, these 8 verses, usually they have very poetic titles, but this is called the 8 verses. And it's expressing really vividly this powerful approach, this outrageous, normally psychologically speaking, an outrageous approach to achieving compassion and love for sentient beings. But it's too shocking, So this is why, Ms. Pabonka Rinpoche in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, as he said, to do this level of practice, you need to be a suitable vessel. Well, basically, in order to go to university, you need to be a suitable vessel, which means you need to have done high school. And in order to go to high school, you need to have done junior school. It's kind of logical in any body of knowledge. Same here. So these 8 verses are kind of too much, And the thing that drives it all, the thing is what's driving these holy beings to practice like this, to want to practice in the way these verses are expressing, which is this whole approach also called transforming problems into happiness, literally learning to greet problems with a happy mind. I mean, this is a very shocking level of practice. If we're still at the level of being an ordinary person, samsaric person, who basically is a self-piteous victim, and please don't think I'm horrible, Lama Yeshe would call ego the self-pity me. It sounds very brutal, but the more we look into our minds, the more we understand what practice is, the more we can see that's true. When you feel completely lost and hopeless, and you believe you don't know why you got born, you didn't ask to get born, did you? Mother made me, father made you, God made you, somebody else made you, they didn't consult you, and then all these bad things happen and good things happen, and nobody knows why. I mean, no wonder we suffer. And of course, the instinct we have, because of lifetimes of practicing attachment and anger, and the dualistic view and no karma, is that we're just these innocent victims and we didn't ask to get born and bad things happen to us. And how dare they happen? That's how we all feel. This is the way we all suffer so tremendously, because we have no understanding of why bad or good things happen, for that matter. We don't care why good things happen. Just give me more, please, because I want them. I don't care why they happen. But bad things, how dare they happen? So this level of practice is really quite shocking, and absolutely a suitable vessel here is a person who's really accomplished some profound renunciation of suffering and its causes, which means that the junior school level has got a deep understanding of the law of karma that, as far as Buddha is concerned, runs the universe. He didn't make it up, he's observed it. There's no creator. Now, I'm not trying to insult anybody if they have a faith in a creator. Buddha's teachings express this so clearly. He's not just being rude, it's his philosophy. He would say that's a misconception. We don't need creating. Our minds are beginningless and endless, and the law of karma runs our minds. We run within the law of karma. Everything we think and do and say produces the person we become, produces our happiness and produces our suffering. So beginning to take this on board already gives us this sense of being accountable and not being a victim. And then we get to the next level, we start to look into our mind and we get to the root of the problem and see attachment and anger and all the nonsense, how they drive the things that we do and say, and we start to change this and get some renunciation of suffering. and its causes. That leads us then to get to the Bodhisattva path. And then in the later stages of trying to cultivate bodhicitta, we use this radical approach of learning to have the courage of welcoming a problem. So it's very simple logic here, and this is the whole thing. It's the essence of it's what's behind all of these 8 verses. This one simple, very clear approach. Okay, so the approach is that you've got already this incredible love and compassion for sentient beings, and you're trying to get to this paradigm shift in the mind where no longer the I is important and only others are important. Now, as absolutely as Pabonka Rinpoche says, you need to be a suitable vessel to even get to that level. I mean, that's outrageous. If you're still overwhelmed by misery and self-pity and suffering and not fair and poor me, it is insanely impossible to think of only cherishing others. It sounds depressing because we don't even comprehend those words. I mean, if we're not ready for that, we can't even, what are they talking about? Only cherish others. When all you do is feel your own pain, your own loss, your own sadness, your own depression, and being bullied by people and abused and harmed. I mean, look at the universe. So it's an insane concept to think I can suddenly start only thinking of others. So of course you've got to be a suitable vessel. Of course you have to understand karma. Of course you have to have renunciation. Of course you have to understand attachment. And this is why you suffer. This is intense already. That's the wisdom wing. That's the first and second scopes. That's already tremendous. So the thing that drives these 8 verses is this radical approach that you've got so much love and compassion, so much compassion, for the suffering of others. So much compassion, if you can imagine that. So in other words, for the bodies, not even a bodhisattva yet, because these are the methods to become a bodhisattva, expressed in these 8 verses. Which, by the way, when they first, this whole approach of transforming problems into happiness, exchanging self for others, these were kept secret. They came from a teacher. He kept them secret because they're so completely insanely opposite to the ordinary world's view, you know. It's not Tantra, it's Sutra teachings, but so opposite to the world that they were kept secret. And it's only after Dromtompa started teaching them that they became public, you know. So the one thing that drives these 8 verses is this incredible compassion for sentient beings and the wish that because you're not yet capable, it's like as if you've got a suffering child, except the whole world are your children, and you don't have the skill yet to heal their sickness. You understand the why they're sick, but you haven't yet accomplished the skill of knowing how to heal their illness. So the analogy here of being that doctor equals being a Buddha. So you're desperate to become a Buddha because then you'll know how to perfectly benefit all these suffering sentient beings who are your children. Think like that. So what drives these 8 verses is this intense wish to smash the obstacles to your Buddhahood. And what are they? Delusions, your ego grasping, which believes in an intrinsic me, and then the self-cherishing of me more than others that comes as a result of ego grasping. So the person in these 8 verses, I mean, Langri Tangpa, we have to assume this is where he's at, has such unbelievable compassion. And so each of these verses will express ever more outrageously, really, the situation, especially 3 of them in the middle there, the situation that would be insane for most of us to think that you welcome this with a happy mind. Because why? Because when something bad happens, that's the perfect opportunity to smash your delusions. That's the logic behind these 8 verses. No other. So we've got to understand that. So what are they? Well, the very first one just sounds ridiculous. It says something like, may I get the benefit from all sentient beings. In order to get the benefit from all sentient beings, not in order to benefit, to give benefit to all sentient beings, but in order to get the benefit from all sentient beings, who are more precious, this is the first 2 lines, who are more precious to me than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Well, I mean, who's heard of a wish-fulfilling jewel? We have not. But just let's put instead $1 million. Be humble. Not 20 million or even 1 billion, but just 1 million. Even 500,000. Even 1,000. Think about it. in order to get the benefit from all sentient beings, to me, who are more precious to me than $1 million. So even this alone, I have to spend the rest of the night just to unpack and unravel the concept, this bizarre concept. What on earth is Langri Tampa talking about? What do you mean they are more precious to me than $1 million? What does that mean? And this is the way they talk, and we don't get this. Let's just analyze these first two lines. The whole point here is to get bodhicitta. That's what we're trying to get, is bodhicitta. This word that's used to refer to this outrageous attitude in the mind as a result of compassion and love. It's the culmination of this incredible levels of compassion and love, where you make this shift in the mind. And it's not just occasionally, but when you've actually stably got it as a realization, so there are two parts of bodhicitta. One is you only automatically, instinctively, and naturally want to benefit whoever's in front of you, all beings, automatically, as if they were your child. Like a mother, I always use the example, a mother, her child is drowning. First you'd have unbelievable compassion, right? Unbelievable compassion. But then there's an extra level of compassion that's unique to the Bodhisattva path, which you get even before you get bodhicitta, which leads to bodhicitta. And this is the unique approach of the compassion of the Bodhisattva, utterly unique. And they call it simply great compassion, mahakaruna. It's a technical term, and it's not only so compassion. What's that? It's defined as a thought. It starts with a thought, but at this point it's intensely strong in this stage of the development of the bodhisattva, of the person. Compassion is you see suffering and you wish they didn't have it. It's empathy with the suffering of another, and so at this level it's enormous compassion. Whoever you see, and we're not just talking. And this is the point too that's so crucial when we understand that this is more advanced levels of practice here. That this compassion isn't just for the way we have compassion now. The way we have compassion now is only for innocent victims. Think about it. In other words, we have to unpack this assumption very deep in our bones. If you're innocent, I'm prepared to have compassion for you. But if I see that you did something to deserve the suffering you're having, well, I'm sorry, you deserve it. Drop dead. You think about this. So in other words, we only really have compassion in our world for I think I joke and say the few innocent victims we can find are a few animals and a few children. That's about it, because the assumptions are so thick in our mind we don't even analyze them. But the Buddha's view of compassion, this is why you've got to do junior school and high school first. When you do the first scope of practice and the second scope of practice, you learn the Four Noble Truths. And there you learn the first noble truth that tells you that there is suffering. And then Buddha articulates 3 levels of suffering. Now, the first level is called the suffering of suffering. Now, that's the only one we even think about, which is basically when the bad things happen. That we understand, but the second level of suffering, called the suffering of change, which shockingly is what we call happiness, and even more subtly, this what's called all-pervasive suffering. These are much subtler levels of suffering that we have to understand for ourselves in order for us to have renunciation of suffering and its causes, and the causes are described in the second noble truth. This is you've got to have this first in the first and second scopes in order to have what's called compassion for the suffering of others. So if you've never analyzed compassion and just assume it's only for the ones who are having the suffering of suffering, which is only the ones where the bad things are happening, they're the only ones we do have compassion for, because that's the only level of suffering we consider when the bad things happen. Look at the world. And there is plenty of that suffering around. The poor people, the sick people, the terrorized people, the raped people, the murdered people, the stolen from people, the animals who are slaughtered and harmed. They're the only ones we have compassion for. If you see a group of people who live in a lovely house in the nicest suburb with beautiful money and things in the bank and looking gorgeous and adoring each other and happy children, and you'd think, what are you talking about? I should have compassion for them. Well, they're the ones having the suffering called the suffering of change. So this is a radically different view, and this is way back in the high school. This is in the wisdom wing. This is in the first scope. This is in the Theravada level of the path. This has nothing to do with the Bodhisattva path yet. That's why you can't get to the Bodhisattva path. You don't know what suffering is, the 3 levels of suffering, and that you haven't yourself become sick of these 3 levels of suffering and understood, secondly, the causes of them, delusions and karma. That's the basis of you getting renunciation. Now you're qualified to really start to realize, when you look at the rest of the world, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. This is unbearable. Look at the billions of people suffering, the animals, the creatures, the rich people, the poor people, and the harmas. I mean, the bodhisattvas, when they understand suffering at the level that we're taught back in the renunciation part of the path, they have more compassion for the harmer than the harmed. Now, this is so shocking you can't even hear it. And this is what's expressed again in these 8 verses, which we're getting to. It's too much for our mind. Well, there's no basis in our world to have compassion for the person who steals from the person who's innocent. There's just nothing. There's none, you know. So this is why you've got to understand karma, and you've got to understand the delusions, and you've got to understand the meaning of this first noble truth, the 3 kinds of suffering, which is the nuts and bolts of what you do in the first stages of practice, the wisdom wing. Now, and that prepares us for the compassion wing. So this great compassion is like the mother, and everybody in the universe is their child. So great compassion is, oh my God, look at that suffering. Now, great compassion, that mother, she has incredible compassion for that baby drowning, but she doesn't look around wondering who's going to save her baby, because she's got great compassion, which is, it's my job. Now, that's the job of the bodhisattva. That becomes their job description, that it's my job to take away the suffering of others. All beings in the universe. The attitude of, if I don't do it, who will? Is this courageous attitude, this outrageous attitude of the bodhisattva. This courageous attitude that you see the suffering in front of you, and then when you finally get it, as this turns into bodhicitta, you only want to benefit whoever is there. There's just no question. It's your job. It's automatic. It's spontaneous now. And second, the long-term goal of the bodhisattva is to never give up, life after life after life, working with sentient beings, at the same time perfecting yourself and achieving Buddhahood. So these 8 verses are this radical approach to doing this job, you know. So these first 2 lines then say, in order to get the benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious to me than $1 million, what it means is, and this is how they always talk, and it takes a while for us to get to hear this, if you're, you know, in other words, if you're here, instead of saying, you know, so like if you're trying to become a doctor, the best doctor on the planet, then this is the way you'd understand these first 2 lines. That in order to become the best doctor, what do you think you need? You need sick people. If you never had sick people, if you never met sick people, how could you become the best doctor? You've got to have sick people. So the bodhisattva's got to have suffering people. So all sentient beings are suffering. So for this person, for these sentient beings, in order to get the benefit from all these sick people, who are more precious to me than $1 million, because without them, how can I become the best doctor? That's the attitude. That's the attitude. They talk about relying upon sentient beings, suffering sentient beings. As Geshe Sopa said, and this is the 8 verses for sure, bodhisattvas need their enemies. They're the best of all. And that's exactly what's happening in these 8 verses. In other words, if you really have such compassion for all the suffering sentient beings, you want to become the best doctor possible, you will not sit there and put your little sign up on the door and then dispense a few band-aids from 9 to 5. You will go and join the Doctors Sans Frontières, will you not, and go to the worst war zones on the planet, because you want to go where the worst suffering is, because that'll test you to the limit to help you become the best doctor possible. That's exactly the attitude here. So in order to get the benefit from all these suffering beings who are more precious to me than $1 million. I mean, it's not on the face of it meaningful even until we start to think about it and unpack it, you know. So to try and imagine having that level of compassion just makes you tired to hear it. Think about it. I mean, we might have a child, 1, and have such compassion. And already it's exhausting. You're still going to have your sleep, you know. Or you have to rotate between you and your wife because you can't possibly stay up more than 12 hours. Because we just don't have the capacity. Our compassion is so limited because we have still got profound levels of ego grasping and self-cherishing, naturally, you know. So it's hard to imagine this level of compassion. We've not even got bodhicitta yet. This is a method to get bodhicitta. So the first two lines, in order to get the benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious to me than $1 million because they're the grist for your mill, for you to become the best doctor on the planet, that is to say a Buddha, what will you do? The second two lines, I will hold them most dear at all times. That's what it says. I will hold them as most dear at all times. Now we're talking not just your baby, not just a few people, not just the nice people, not just the ones you agree with, but we're talking all sentient beings, because you've done the work starting with equanimity, going to the next level, getting love, compassion, and blah, 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 You've gone through the stages of practice. So it's hard to imagine this level of compassion, and we haven't even become a bodhisattva yet. So it's like, excuse me, when I hear Lama Zopa Rinpoche talking about compassion, the level of bodhisattvas, it's hard to conceptualize it. It's hard to imagine it, because we can see a musician playing brilliant music. We can kind of appreciate it, but we can't even imagine. Wouldn't even trust that there could be a person who could have such levels of compassion in the way they describe in the teachings. So this is why, we've got to just take it as according to our capacity and try and imagine it, and imagine that this is a possibility and all these are the techniques of how to get this. But to even want to be driven to want to get this compassion sounds exhausting, doesn't it, The second verse says something like, and this I always joke and say, if your therapist recommended this to you as a method, you could sue them for abuse. You listen. The second verse says something like, when I am among other people, when I'm with others, yes, and we, these days maybe sitting at home if there's lockdown, but we've always seemed to be surrounded by other people, right? When I am with others, hear this advice, please. I will see myself as the lowest of all. Not only that, and I will see all of them as supreme. Now these words, it's like too hard to even hear it. We would just not talk this way. If we talked about having love and compassion for others, we like those words, but to say it to this degree sounds like mental illness to us, doesn't it? When I am with others, I will see myself as the lowest of all. So let's hear how we interpret that. So where are we coming from? We mostly are coming from, we're not even very advanced, most of us. We've still got the victim mentality. We still feel unloved. We still feel we're not worthy. We still feel we're pretty hopeless. We feel that we've got detachment and anger and jealousy. We don't feel many people like us. We're hungry for people to think we're wonderful. We always feel dissatisfied. Join the universe, folks. This is being a normal sentient being. So to hear these words, it's like absolutely insulting. It's like we'd say to him, excuse me, mate, I already do that. What do you want me to do? Rub my nose in it? We can't even imagine these words. So let's analyze what it actually means, The advantage of this practice. Because the point is, as I said, the one theme through this entire 8 verses is to get to use the most radical methods possible to smash the misconception that there is an I here in the first place, and in here on the Bodhisattva path, especially the way it's framed, and the consequence of that, which is this intense instinct to put me first. So even we say these words, we'll go, oh yeah, that sounds good. Put me first. Of course I must. So it's really hard to hear how the normal way the normal world is for the Buddha in this framework is actual serious mental illness. We're all totally, neurotically, obsessively self-centered. And what all Buddha's telling us is that is why we suffer. So these methods are outrageous, You've got to be a suitable vessel to hear this. I mean, I'm not surprised they were kept hidden. They should be kept hidden now. It's hard. That's why you can't just leap into this level of teaching. You've got to have done the background first. Junior school, understood karma, understood how you cause your own suffering, understood renunciation, attachment and anger, understood this, understand the earlier stages of the Bodhisattva path. This is quite shocking, these verses, But there's utter logic to them, clear logic. And when we understand it, at least intellectually, we can start to work with them. Otherwise it's just like ridiculous words, nonsense, weird, So how to practice this. How would you take this as a technique that you might put into practice? It says here, so dramatic, when I am with others, whenever I am with others, I will see myself as the lowest of all and see others as supreme. So, I mean, maybe try it once a year. Maybe try it once a month. So what does it mean? How would you do this? Well, I think it's very practical if you understand the logic behind these verses. If we observe how we are when we're with others, when we have low self-esteem and all those things, it's really, if we analyze it carefully, it's really hard for us to see somebody we can't imagine in a healthy way seeing somebody as so-called higher than me, as to see myself as lower, because that's how we feel already. We do think we're the lowest, but we don't hear it in the way they're saying it in these verses at all. We hear it as self-loathing. And actually, this is the thing about, if we think about also an interesting, one of the delusions is a delusion we all understand is called arrogance. Now, we would all definitely think we do not have arrogance. We have got the flip side, and that's called low self-esteem. I am nobody. We all feel that, isn't it? But to hear that from this Buddhist analysis of these delusions, that's the flip side of arrogance. You could argue if we didn't have arrogance, we could not possibly have low self-esteem. This is very sobering to think about. Because why? Because arrogance, all the delusions are rooted in the root delusion that assumes there is an intrinsic separate moi. Okay? So attachment is the delusion that is hungry to get what that me wants. Anger is the outrage when it doesn't get what it wants. And then arrogance is like an overinflation of that sense of a self. So when you've been deflated, when somebody insults you, where do you go? But you go crashing down. So we spend most of our time down. Therefore, we don't even notice that we actually have arrogance. This is too shocking to hear it. Because when we have got low self-esteem and we see other people who are better than us, think of this. We are resentful. How dare they be better than me? So why do we think that? Because we would rather be where they are. We would rather be high. But we don't like to think that. We don't like to own that. It's quite we've got to unpack these emotions, these assumptions we have. Because if you put it this way, if you've got a person who's humble, we mistake that as low self-esteem. No, humility is a virtue. It's a relaxed state of mind. A person who's humble actually is content with themselves, and they are easily able to praise another person. But a person with low self-esteem, which is an overemphasis on the neurotic I, who isn't enough and hasn't got enough and isn't appreciated by enough, then there's kind of an outrage there that you're not a high person. You'd rather be the high. But we don't like to think that. We need to look into our minds and see it, So in other words, an arrogant person join the universe. I think I've heard some lamas say that in the West, and I think if we look at it carefully, this is one of our main delusions. That's why we mostly have low self-esteem. This tortured sense of a me that we think other people think isn't enough because we want to be seen. We want to be desperate. It's like mixed also with this attachment for reputation we have, It's very, very fascinating. So what's a healthy way that's being suggested here? When you're with others, it's a really good practice in your mind. Just think it. Think of someone just even now, think of someone like at work, in your family, especially if you don't like them much. All you got to do, this is the practice, is think right now of that person and now think of just one thing that they do better than you. That's it. That's all you have to do. It's profound practice. It's too vague to go, oh, they're higher than me. Just be more precise. Maybe they've got cuter ears. Maybe their hair is nicer. And I'm not joking, because we pick out these types of things, Maybe their legs are nicer. Maybe they're more intelligent. Maybe they've got smoother skin. Maybe they look younger than you and you're older and they're older than you. It's little things all the time that ego is always pointing out, and because we're so scared with ego, with sort of like scaredy baby ego, upset that a person's better or more or bigger or why. That's why we criticize or we get angry, we get resentful. It's all coming down to pride, which also comes down to, attachment. There's a real relationship between all these delusions. We've got to look into them carefully, unpack them, because they're very deeply packed with many layers, So to be able to think of one person right now whom easy to think of a person you adore, but a person you don't like especially, think of one thing that they do better than you. Not just one thing about them that's nice, but one thing that's better than you. That's the putting you down, if you like, thinking that they are higher than you. We don't like those words in our culture, but think of the meaning. It's a very profound practice. It's a very amazing practice. Because what we're trying to do here, as I said, the one theme through these 8 verses is to smash, finally, the sense of a separate me, which is coming from ego grasping, which then gives rise to attachment, which gives rise to self-cherishing, which is putting me first. So it's a very profound practice. We've got to hear it properly, because we don't use these words, How many is that? That's 2. That's 2 verses, all right, already. So any questions so far? Any questions so far about just these, what I've said so far already in the last 40 minutes? Any questions? I'd love to hear some. Eileen, good, talk to me. Yes. I don't know what's going on. I can't hear anybody. What's happening? I can't hear anybody. I did hear a person before, didn't I? Yeah, I did hear you before. So, Eileen, can you all hear Eileen?
Yes, I have it now.
Oh, now I've got you now. Good. Talk to me.
Sorry.
Good. Talk to me.
This whole thing, this issue about patience and adversity and things that happen to us, whether it's illness or someone says something unkind, it could be any suffering that happens throughout the course of a day, that we should see it as an opportunity to purify our personal karma. Do I understand that?
Okay, I understand that, Eileen. So, okay.
Yeah.
That is one aspect of it, but the thing that's implicit. Absolutely, there's no doubt. But the thing that drives these 8 verses, as I said, there's one theme that drives the 8 verses, is that you are desperate to get the situations that are the difficult ones and to greet them so happily, because that will smash the root delusion called ego grasping, which believes in an intrinsic me, which gives rise to putting me first. So of course it would purify your karma, but that's not what's driving you. Of course, every millisecond you ever have suffering, that is putting an atomic bomb under your past suffering. There's no question. Anytime anything bad happens, that is purifying your karma. There's no doubt. But the thing driving this is this earnest wish to smash the delusions that are preventing you from becoming a Buddha, that's what's preventing you from helping others. That's the main drive throughout. But of course, that would absolutely be the point. Yes, of course.
So in other words, if you have an experience and you have an adverse reaction and response, you're impatient, you're angry, that moment of seeing that how you're responding.
No, it's way more than that. No. You see, at this point, that's the work really more in the middle scope, in the high school, where you're working on your mind and you're really working like a demon to watch your delusions like a hawk, and that's when they come out of control and you do lots of work. By now, you could argue, for the person who's genuinely qualified in these 8 verses, you've really subdued your delusions. You're really controlled now, and you are eagerly wanting the worst scenario so you can smash even the more subtle levels, and you just eat up problems for breakfast by this point. You understand my point?
I do. No, I do.
Okay, good.
The difference. Thank you.
Yes, darling, exactly. So, of course, for us, it'll be whatever level we're at,
Yes.
Which is, of course, most of us are not very advanced. So it will be an enormous struggle to even consider the possibility of even thinking these things that are in these verses. Attempting to do it is enormously difficult. It's intensely painful. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
Absolutely. Okay, so the next verse. Oh, no, sorry. Any more questions? Anybody else?
No, thank you, Rabina.
Good, Eileen. Good. Thank you, darling. Thank you. What else, people? Any more questions? Yes, Maddie.
Yes, thank you, Venerable Rabina. The best I can do is use an example for this question. If you have like dog poop, say, and you pick up the dog poop in a plastic bag, it's just going to preserve the dog poop in the plastic bag. How do you know when to leave the dog poop and when to pick the dog poop up?
It's all a question of what practices you're talking. And here we're talking about the practice of welcoming the problems. So it depends on where you're at. But in these verses, coming from the explicit meaning in these verses, if you were at this level, is, as I said to Eileen, these are the most advanced level where, you're eager to have the worst possible thing happen because you know it's going to put an atomic bomb under your delusions. You're not kind of resisting it. You're not worried about it. This is a highly advanced level. Of course, where we're at, we do it the best we can.
Okay.
Do you understand my point?
I do.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. What else, people? Okay, let's continue. So the next verse, I forget which verse it says. No, I think the next verse, it seems to be sort of slightly off on a different tack. It's very curious. This verse basically says, you're going to watch your mind like a hawk every millisecond, and the second a delusion arises, attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, blah, 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 the second a delusion arises which will harm you and others, you will instantly avert it. So, I mean, already this is like a joke for us because the default mode for us is delusions. But this is a person that sounds like their default mode is virtue. And the moment a naughty delusion arises, you will avert it immediately. I mean, this is what practice is from day one. But this is pretty profound. It shows, the second a delusion arises. I mean, the default mode for most of us until we're quite advanced is attachment runs the show. Anger is there. Jealousy is there. It's not making us it's not depressing. It's just how it is. We have to be realistic, So this is already advanced. Now, the next three are really the killer. And each one gets worse than the previous one. So the way I interpret these next three, you think about this first one is a bit like you read the newspapers and you see the world, and this is your approach when you see. So it says in this. Now remember, this is like 12th century Tibet. Even 20th century Tibet, you probably, you didn't have television or radios. You probably know the local people in the local village. You might have had a few wackos, but not that many. Now compare that with 21st century maniac world, where we're absolutely drowning in maniacs and crazy people and warmongers and the dramas of suffering beings is beyond belief. But even this is just a 12th century Tibet. Whenever you hear about it, says, a deeply suffering person an evil person who does harm to others and themselves. So what's a word we'd use for that? When you think about or hear about or notice when you read your iPad, your newspaper, your television, God knows what, a psychopath. That's a really great word we use for a wacky person, a person who is causing unbelievable suffering to others, an evil person, as they would say, and causing themselves incredible harm. How are you going to see about this person? You see them as your most precious treasure. So, excuse me, mate, what do you mean? What does he mean by this? Because the natural response to a maniac, a harmer, a psychopath, is the shock and horror at the harm they're doing, right? Now for us, because we have no way in the world of understanding why a person is a psychopath, we think they're evil and they should be sent to hell immediately. And they deserve every bit of suffering, and they're evil and they're monsters, and we can't imagine why they're monsters. We probably try and blame their mother. Mums get the blame for everything. But in general, we don't know how to even understand it. Now, this is why this makes no sense, this verse, not to mention the next two, unless we understand karma, which is junior school, unless we understand delusions, which is high school, unless we understand why people suffer and why people do things to harm others. So here we're trying, again, this is like you go into the tent in the war zone and someone's just lost two legs. This is the most intense test of your skills. This is like this here, and this is the least of the three. The next two get even worse, because you're trying to find the worst scenario possible, a person who's a psychopath harming others, and you want to see them as a precious treasure. Why? Because they will enable you to develop incredible compassion, to go beyond your usual view of compassion, and to smash your self-cherishing, smash your attachment. because this person is unbelievably suffering. This is why the Bodhisattvas, when you get to Bodhisattvas, they have more compassion for the harmers than the harmed. And of course, that's based on the Buddha's view of we've all got countless past lives, we've all done countless past actions, we've all harmed others. We've all harmed others. We've been harmed countless times, and you're born in this life due to some negativity, and you're a psychopath, as we like to call it. You're driven by insanity, you're driven by rage, you're driven by anger, you're driven by the wish to kill, torture, rape, lie, you name it. Look at the world, please. This is what is causing this person to harm others. And when we understand our own mind, right back in the renunciation part of the path, right back in the junior school and high school, this is the key point that we miss completely in our culture. At the moment, there is no space, there's no way, there's no logic for us to have compassion for this person. Okay, if you're a devoted Christian, then you know this person is also, is God loves everybody. So then you would know that God somehow is in that person, and that would be the reason for you to have compassion for this person. That's good enough. But the materialist philosophical view of the world, there is no logic whatsoever to have compassion for a psychopath. We can't imagine it. It doesn't fit in our philosophy and psychology, does it? So that's why here, if we don't understand the first stages of practice, which is that I have to stop harming others. Why, Buddha? Because, honey child, Rabina, everything you do that harms others will ripen as suffering for you in the future. So when we understand that simple concept of karma, we will understand why now in this world there's a person driven by their own delusions, driven by their psychosis. There's a friend of mine on death row in Kentucky. My Buddhist friend Mitchell tells me, and I know this guy, he comes to the classes I give, he said, Rabina, he thinks of torture all the time. Now, we don't have any understanding of this in our world. We don't know why a person is born this way. We just have no explanations. So then, of course, we just have to hate the person or be scared of the person or think they just wish they'd die or something. So this dude, when we realize right back in the beginning that when we start to see our own mind and start to see the things that few little baby things that we do to harm others, think about it. Anything you've ever done in your life to even harm slightly any human being, any rat, any roach, any ant, think about it. What has driven that? It is not love. It is not compassion. It is not empathy. It is not wisdom. It's fear, anger, attachment, rage, or whatever. So when you know the little bit of rage and fear that you have is why you have harmed others, and you own that and get sick of that suffering, now you have the basis for compassion for a psychopath. Can you only imagine compulsively thinking all day about torture? But we go, he's got a free will. He doesn't have to think of torture. Well, I'm sorry, check your own mind. When was the last time you said, I think I'll stop being depressed? I think I won't eat 2 pieces of chocolate cake. Don't be ridiculous. We're driven by our own ridiculous neuroses. We need a bit of humility here, I mean, we think about chocolate cake all day. This poor dude thinks about torture all day. Can you only imagine his suffering? Think of a pedophile. Due to their ridiculous delusions in a past life, obsession with sex, they get born in this life thinking all the time about jumping on little boys and little girls. They can't control their minds because they're completely deluded. That's what a psychopath is. Well, join the club here. We can't even stop thinking about pathetic old chocolate cake. So when we realize our own delusions and the why we harm others in the first part of the practice, this gives us incredible empathy, incredible compassion for ourselves. Then that's the basis for empathy for others. Without doing the work on our own selves first, it is not possible to have compassion, even for a slightly annoying person. Forget about a psychopath. Are we communicating, people? So that will be my precious treasure. The next verse gets even worse. I think it's getting closer to home now. This is like at work. Think about it. Basically it's saying, if anybody accuses me of doing something I didn't do, I will take the blame and give the victory to them. Now this is insanity. Nobody would think that would be the first thing to do. You'd think you'd be a doormat. You think you'd be a mentally ill person to take the blame. What do you mean take the blame? What do you mean give the victory to them? Again, all we're trying to do here is smash ego grasping, smash self-cherishing, so that it'll be a marvelous opportunity. Yes, you're absolutely right. I did do that, and I'm really sorry. Can you imagine that? Even if we did do something wrong, we can't take responsibility. It's too intense for us, I mean, these are outrageous levels of practice. That's why, if you are not ready for these levels of practice, you kindly close the book, close the page, and do not do them. You've got to see where you're at. This is what I keep stressing, the way these teachings are presented. They're levels, they're degrees of capability. You've got to know where you're at. So like if you're still in a miserable victim mode, totally scared of life, no sense of responsibility, living in fear, don't have any self-respect, and have so much attachment and neediness, and always want your husband or your boyfriend to always love you, and they keep punching you in the nose. Oh, I'm sure he really loves me. Punch again, and no understanding of suffering, no understanding of yourself, living in fear. Then you are not ready for this practice. No way in the universe. You got to stand up and say, "Excuse me, mate, I am out of here." You've got to know where you're at and what appropriate practice is. You've got to know where you're at and what level of practice. Whereas if we just read all these Buddhist teachings and see them as an absolute, giving them equal status, you'll go mad. You'll misuse them. You'll just be a victim, and you'll go and sue Buddhism because it made you ill, made you crazy, made you think that you've got to put up with your abusive husband. No, you just didn't understand it as an advanced teaching. You're not ready for it. I can't stress this enough. It's so important to hear this. These are outrageous levels of practice. Try it once a year. Good on you. See if you can do it. The next one is the closest to home. Now, what are you going to do with these ones? I forget what the thing is. Not to see them as a precious treasure. I forget. There's a little, each verse says, the first one is you'll see them as a precious treasure. The second one, you'll just give the victory to others, I think. You give the victory to them. The third one's even is like your husband or your child. The number of parents who come to me, I mean, I'm in tears because the number of parents, who've been, mothers especially, who've been totally rejected by their children. Or you've given your life to your husband for 47 years and you come home and there's a note, "I've left you for the secretary," or something, these classic stories, You've suddenly given your entire life to somebody else. You've been completely unconscious of what's going on, which is what most people in their relationships are like. And then one day he leaves you and you're just beyond devastated. Well, how are you going to feel about this person? It says something like a person whom I've given my whole life for, all I've done is benefit, and then they turn against me and do me terrible harm. How are you going to see about them? You're going to see them as your guru. Now, these are everybody in this room here, everybody I ever meet on the planet. We've all had experiences of people who are mean, of crazy people, people lying to us, people not believing our words, people harming us, people cheating on us, families, everybody. This is called the suffering. This is called the third kind of karma, called experiences similar to the cause, which is all the stuff that happens to us at the hands of others. There's also all the good stuff, but we take all that for granted. We just assume I deserve good things. People have to see me as nice and must give me things, but we don't understand karma, so we don't therefore appreciate the good. We only get shattered when the bad things happen. This is why we all suffer so terribly on this planet. Any questions about all this now? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 2 more verses to go, I think. These are the intense ones. Any questions, people? Please, I need you to ask me questions.
Hi, Rubina. How are you?
Hello there. Happy to see you.
Good to see you too. I wanted to ask, so when, we see that somebody has something good or something better than us, or like something that we want, like they're better at us, it's a skill or something, would it be like a helpful start? And this is something I've been practicing for a while, is instead of, reacting in a way that to upset that person because they have something that we want or something like that, just quietly recognizing our own jealousy or our own delusion, and just recognizing it with that, and choosing to act in a way that won't harm them.
Of course, no, absolutely, darling. That's all part of the practice. It's not the specific exact practice here, because the next level is to actually be delighted for them. But if you can do all that, amazing. Of course, honey, that's the first one. That's always the first one. Whatever we see out there, the way the normal world is. We always point the thing out there and then we find fault or whatever it is. Here, it's seeing what is arising in the mind. So, of course, honey child, that's daily practice, absolutely. And the next level would be, from the jealousy would be, this is where another version of it would be, you delight for that person. You think, how marvelous, I'm so happy for them. That's the instant atomic bomb under jealousy. But here it's very specific to see yourself as lower than them and them as high. It's quite a specific another approach. But generally what you're saying is, of course, absolutely correct, sweetheart. That's daily practice. Yes.
And just recognizing that they created the cause
to have
precisely,
that,
darling. Good to happen to them.
Precisely. That's exactly right.
And when others do that to us, when they see that we're doing well, recognize that we do it as well.
So I missed that point. I missed the point, sweetheart. What was it?
So, and then if the same thing happens to us, for example, I have a skill and somebody acts out of rage, out of jealousy, just recognizing that although we're working on it, not to react negatively, that having compassion for that person because we experience it as well.
Absolutely. Same thing, sweetheart. Again, exactly the same. And this happens, isn't it, in families, at work? We can always see this. Yeah, it's a very powerful practice because it's always so painful because we know we did nothing wrong. It's just their own jealousy. So it's good to see it, but with humility to recognize that's because they're jealous, and then to, yes, exactly, the right attitude, have compassion for them and realize that also that's another practice in general, isn't it? Every time you see somebody else's jealousy, one of the approaches is, thank you for showing me my own jealousy. Do you understand? That's a very powerful practice. Yeah. Every second. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely, darling. Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Perfect. Who else? Anybody? Questions? No? Nothing?
I have one question.
Yes, please. Rubina. Yes, Wolfgang. Talk to me.
Venerable Rubina, what is your experience? How far can you practically go on the Buddhist path as a layperson, and when is it really necessary to retreat from the
I understand
life?
Exactly, Wolfgang. I understand exactly. So again, this is where we look at the levels of this whole path, the presentation. The first level of practice, which is the wisdom wing, as I always just, as we say, this lovely analogy, the wisdom wing and the compassion wing. The wisdom wing is all the work you have to do on yourself. And that's the first level where you learn to abide by the laws of karma, you live in vows, you live a strict discipline, and then you go to the next level where you start to really look deep into your mind. So you could argue, Wolfgang, this is the retreat mode. So the ideal scenario to do this wisdom wing work is absolutely the best, is no question. Give up wife, babies, children, jobs, become a monk or a nun and go to the mountains. That's the quickest, it's sort of like the quickest way to become like Federer is to give up everything and practice tennis 12 hours a day. It's sort of logical. So the wisdom wing is exactly that. The best way is to give it up. Now, 99% of us might not have the conditions that allow us to do that. So we have to be humble and be a weekend tennis player or a daily tennis player. You get my point? But if all the conditions are there for us, and and some of us have that karma. I mean, in me, and that's the ideal scenario to quickly get realizations, to quickly get renunciation, to get then single point of concentration, so then you can get out of samsara. Then you come back into the world, and then now you can do the compassion wing. So even the yogis go into meditation to do the compassion wing as well, because they can do radical levels of work, and then you can come into the world and put your money where your mouth is and genuinely be qualified to benefit others. So the ideal is, of course, and sometimes in your own life, it's you do some retreat, even a little bit, even a weekend retreat is brilliant sometimes. We need this. And then a week sometimes, or a month, and many people do that, lay people as well as monks or nuns. But the other thing is this. For example, monks or nuns doesn't follow because you're a monk or a nun that you're living in the mountains. 99% of the monks and nuns I know are not, like me as well, are not living in the mountains. So we're like, in that same sense, where lay people and monks and nuns are similar insofar as we are in the world. But some of the people, lay people as well as monks and nuns, also do go to the mountains. So it's a question of what's right for us at different times. But in general, the right approach in our life, whether we're lay person or monk or nun, is to take some time for doing a retreat. It's really excellent opportunity. And of course, with many people, it's too difficult, especially if you're a parent with 5 children and wives and jobs and responsibilities. Unless you have a very, very compassionate partner, It's often not easy for most people to do this. If both partners can agree on the same thing, that can really work nicely. Are we communicating?
Yes, thank you.
But also, Wolfgang, it doesn't follow, because it depends on who you are and what karma you've got from the past and what practices you've done. So, I always remember, for example, 2 examples. When I was editing our magazine, Mandala, Lama Zopa would occasionally send me letters from his disciples about their experiences. And so he would, of course, say to publish them anonymously. Well, I remember 2 examples. One, in fact, was the classic retreater. It was one of our nuns. Everybody knows her. She lived in one of the retreat centers for years and had really extraordinary meditation experiences. The other one was a layperson who was like, the world would feel sorry for him because he was a single man. He lived in a house with his old auntie who had cancer. So on the face of it, he looked like a person you'd feel sorry for. But actually, he was a great yogi who spent hours every day doing his advanced meditations. And he was already a great bodhisattva. But there he was, a layperson, but he was a hidden practitioner. So it all depends on where we're at, what we need at different times. Do you understand?
Yes, thank you.
Good, Wolfgang. Thank you so much. Who else, people? Who else? Any other questions? Any more questions? Okay, so the next verse. What's the next verse say? I can't remember. Let me have a look. Here we go. The 8 verses. So the next verse says, in short, this verse, I would say, is the verse that's the basis of the practice that we know called Tonglen, giving and taking, which is this really radical practice, very simple technically, but which I find fascinating that so many modern people, and I mean Western people, love this technique, but actually it's really advanced, it's extraordinary. And this is the culmination of these last 7 verses. So what it says literally is, in short, both directly and indirectly, do I offer every happiness, and my happiness, do I offer my happiness, and whatever I've got, I offer this to all my mothers, and that I will secretly take upon myself all their harmful actions and suffering. So this is the attitude where you're completely making this complete paradigm shift, doing the complete opposite of what the world would normally think is usual, So here, this is formalized in meditation, where you can use your breath as a focal point. And basically the meditation, as I said, is called Tonglen, giving, taking. Tibetans are very efficient in their grammar. They don't have and or the or a or anything. It's very interesting. So what you do, basically, you start with this, and people do years. Again, this is the point, Wolfgang. This is a bodhisattva practice, but people can do years and years of meditation on all of these in retreat, which is where you can get realizations very quickly, and then you're qualified, so you can come into the world and actually put your money where your mouth is and really be of benefit to others. So this practice, basically, a simple way to start. You'd sit down to meditate. You'd visualize in front of you somebody, let's say start with your best friend, your beloved, one of your children, for example. You would imagine them with a headache, something as simple as this. So the basic approach of this technique is as follows. When you breathe in first, you breathe in, so obviously you breathe out first, and you breathe in. What you're visualizing, you're using a creative imagination. What you imagine is breathing in this person's headache. So you visualize it like yucky smoke, and it's like you're breathing in their headache. And then they often talk about one example, one way of doing this. You'd imagine your self-centeredness, your self-cherishing, as like a little rock at your heart. So when you breathe in this yucky smoke, you imagine breathing it in, and it kind of it chips away at your self-cherishing. So what you do, this is the taking part. You imagine taking off that person and bringing it into yourself, their headache. Now, what's the logic of this? First of all, you're not trying to get a headache. That's the biggest mistake possible. You're not trying to get a headache. The person sitting there, they've got a headache, but all you're doing is using this person as the object of your meditation to enable you to get this very powerful level of compassion that not only ordinary compassion do you think, oh my goodness, look at that suffering, that's terrible, that's compassion. The next level is great compassion, where you think, what can I do to help? But this is an extra level on top where you go, you know what, I would rather have the headache than you. That's the attitude. Now, that's what parents talk. I mean, it blows your mind. Parents always say this. When their child is sick or got cancer, I hear mothers and fathers say, I wish I could have it instead. That's exactly what this view is. So you're not trying to get a headache. What you're doing is getting this really brave attitude, this courageous attitude, trying to cultivate it, that if you could, you would rather have the headache than this person. So when you're visualizing, you're imagining the headache, you'd rather, and as you're breathing it into you, you're delighted that now they are free of a headache. That's how you're thinking, and that you'd rather have the headache. And then when you breathe out, you would breathe out blissful light, and you imagine giving them whatever you've got, giving them your health, your wealth, your well-being, all your virtue, all your merit, giving it all to them. So it's taking upon yourself their suffering and giving to them your happiness. So it's like the exact opposite of what ego would do. So it's said to be such a profound practice. And the other thing this practice is not, is it is not a healing technique. We tend to think if a person's sick, I'm going to do Tonglen. No, that's not the point here. You can do lots of practices to help people, like the medicine Buddha. There's many practices you can do to help sick people. This is simply you using a sick person as your object of visualization in order for you to practice developing this courageous attitude that if you could, you would take upon yourself their suffering and you would give them your happiness. So is this clear, people, this practice? So it's very outrageous to have this attitude, you know. But you don't have to just do it meditating. You can just do it, you're walking down the street. I always think of the example, you're walking down the street, you know, and you see a homeless person. Well, the first instinct we have is, thank God it's not me. It's like a relief, isn't it? We think we can't bear the pain, we can't bear the suffering, and it's almost too much for us to even begin to contemplate it. And then, so what would be Tonglen in this environment? This is very shocking, but think about it. You think, well, I'm not capable, but let me imagine that if I had the courage, I would walk over there and I would give them my clothes and I would swap position and I would give them my car keys and I would give them my house and I will literally exchange myself for others. Imagine this, but we're even too scared to think that. It is too shocking. It's too shocking, you know, but that's what Tonglen means. And then when you've actually achieved it, one of the signs of success, that's why I always tell this story, and I'll tell it now. I've told this story so many times. Our friend Harry, many of you might know this American guy. He's been a monk for many years and he's been a meditator, living up in the mountains, naked, with, you know, it seems like a genuine realization, seems to have accomplished bodhicitta. People who see him and know him just say, oh yeah, Harry's wonderful. Everybody who knows Harry loves Harry. And he's right now a few hours north of me in Colorado in retreat with his partner. She's doing her 3-year retreat. He's done years and years. They both have done years of long retreat in caves up in the mountains near where Lama Zopa's cave is, you know. So everybody who knows Harry says, oh yeah, Harry's a bodhisattva. Harry's a bodhisattva. So I thought, yeah, he might be, but I don't know. But when I heard this story, it seemed to me he must have achieved bodhicitta to do this. So I'll tell you the story. This is like the final proof of the pudding that he's accomplished Tonglen, because that's what finally culminates in this bodhicitta. This is the kind of the practice that is where you make this paradigm shift and now truly you've got this bodhicitta. We think of these things as like momentary experiences, but we're talking about genuine, stable realizations. You don't just get flashes of it. We're talking about actually achieving this, you know, sincerely every single second. So this wonderful story, Harry has a cave up in the mountains. This is back in the 90s, I think, before cell phones, and he was at Kopan Monastery in Kathmandu, and he was getting ready to go to his cave again. And often they'd walk up, you know, at least you'd walk, you know, you might fly to Lukla. We did these series. We did 3 times, I think, pilgrimages, treks up there to Laudo, Lama Zopa's cave, up in the mountains. So you fly to Lukla and then you walk 5 days. I mean, the Sherpas do it in 1 day, but we had to do it in 5 days. because it's quite high up there, several thousand meters, I forget. So anyway, we did, and it's really intense. I mean, I've never walked up a mountain in my entire I don't even walk up a hill. I walk flat, and usually I walk in a city if it's Manhattan. I live in weird old Santa Fe, which is like a little funny little country town with their mud brick houses. I sort of joke about it. I don't walk much at all. I walk up and down and around occasionally, but not much. But as to walking out in the hills and the mountains, I just couldn't believe it, So I decided I'd go, and this is me now, jumping off from Harry to me, sorry. And I'd lead these pilgrimages. It was very moving to go up there anyway. So anyway, Harry was getting ready at Kopan to pack his bags and go, and then he left, and then Lama Zopa heard that Harry was going up to the mountains to his cave again. And Lama Zopa said he had a dream that Harry would die. Well, Lama Zopa doesn't sleep, okay? So Lama Zopa is just being humble because he's totally clairvoyant, and this is where you have to understand these stages of development of these great bodhisattvas. Even like clairvoyance is what you get when you've got single point of concentration. It's a Hinayana technique. We've had that in many lifetimes, Buddha says, but we haven't used it all the way to realize emptiness and cut the root of suffering. Anyway, Lama Zopa, clairvoyant, compassion, all these things. So he just said, he had a dream that Harry would die and get a message to him to not go. Well, Harry had already left and there's no cell phones. So then he said, okay, well, please go and ask Geshe Lama Kontrog, this amazing yogi, I've mentioned him quite a few times, who was at Sera Monastery with Lama Yeshe in Tibet. And then when he escaped from Tibet, he went off into the mountains, and he was living naked, no food, no sleep, no clothes, no anything, living on the air, living in Vajrayogini's Pure Land, a great tantric yogi in the mountains for years. And he came down and he lived at Kopan the last 20 years of his life, and everybody loved this Lama. He was very humble, very unassuming. So Lama Zopa said, go and ask Geshe Lama Kontrog to pray for Harry. That's the story. So anyway, now over to Harry. I met him years later, and I'd heard this story of what happened because there was a nun who went up there with him. She must have told the story. So then I verified it with Harry. So the story goes like this. He's walking up the mountains, and one of the part of the road there'd been an avalanche or something, and then it was all blocked. And I know at some point he pointed out to us when we did our trek where exactly that spot was, and then we, at that certain spot, people, when they got past there, we did all these prayers and things at this particular spot where this event happened. So Harry's walking up this really treacherous path. He's got his 20-kilo pack on his back, and the Sherpas, they carry 60 kilos, these little skinny guys. They pride themselves on it. They wear their flip-flops, And so he's suddenly coming down this really narrow, treacherous path, and it is treacherous even when it's fairly wide. I mean, I nearly got pushed off the mountain by a yak, and there's quite big cliffs. So anyway, Harry said suddenly, coming down the path, right in front of him, there were these three porters, three Sherpas. And and it was so intense and so quick, and so you've got to concentrate intensely. And these porters, they wear their 60 kilos on their back, and their heads are bent down. All you can see is your feet, A friend of mine did it for 10 days one time. He said, Rabina, all I could see for 10 days was my feet, because you're bent over half. So these three porters coming down. So they're nobody to Harry. They're strangers, right? So he said the first thought that occurred, and he spent years in retreat doing exactly these practices that we're talking about. So he said the first thought that arose in his mind was, okay, 3 of them and 1 of me. So I'll step to the side. So in all the teachings on how to get bodhicitta, there's all this logic you're supposed to use to smash ego's ridiculous assumptions that I'm more important. So then you think, well, if 3 people is more than 1, I'm 1, therefore they're more important. I mean, it's hilarious, isn't it? So automatically, without any drama, he stepped to the side by the edge of the cliff. That second. Then the next second, he saw how intense it was and how narrow. So then he said to himself, if they knock me, I will not hold on. Now that's demented, right? Not normal people would think that. If they're your children, maybe. But they're strangers. He doesn't know these people. But these are the thoughts that arose. So before I even tell you the rest of the story, this is the whole point. These meditations which people do, this is like Wolfgang's question, he's been doing years of retreat doing all these meditations, sincerely to the point where you actually get the realizations. Not just temporarily or momentarily, you genuinely have made these shifts in your mind. This is why at this moment in time, the proof of the pudding, he shows he must have realized this. You can't just do this automatically. You can't just leap onto the court and play like Federer if you haven't done 20 years of practice. So you can't just do this, think that way, if you haven't done 20 years of practice and realize these levels. So what happened is, of course, the next millisecond they walk so intensely, they're struggling to keep their packs and they're walking intensely, and they do knock him, and he doesn't hold on. So he said, he's falling back. His pack is pulling him off the mountain. His feet are still on the ground. And he said, I had a psychic vision of the entire fall. And I saw my body crash to the ground. So he's being pulled back. He's not holding on. And then he said, I felt the hands of Geshe Lama Konchog forcefully pushing me, so he reversed direction and he fell onto the path. So for me, that's many teachings in that. The first one is there's no way in the world you'd do that spontaneously. Ego would naturally take over. You'd sit against the edge of the cliff and hope they don't fall off. And if they do, well, it's not my fault. What can I do? It was so treacherous. But so then there's no way, if you hadn't done years of practice, that this isn't exactly what you would do if you'd realize these things, And then, of course, it also shows, and this is the bigger one for me, the power of Buddha. I mean, Geshe Lama Konchog, whether he's a Buddha or not, is in all the teachings. There are these, when you study it in the monastic university system, there are these detailed texts of each level of exactly what realizations you'd have. At this level, you do this, and you're capable of this, and you can manifest your mind in this many bodies, and you can do this. It's a list, literally a list in the Bodhisattva path of the stages of development of bodhisattvas. And even the lowest level bodhisattva, a person who's realized emptiness and is on the first bhumi, as they call it, of the 10 stages that lead you to Buddhahood, you can already manifest your mind in 100 different bodies simultaneously. I mean, all this is like science fiction for us, but this is the outrageousness of the Bodhisattva path, and it's all there in the text, a living tradition. So he had the power, complete clairvoyance, could see exactly what was going on. He was able to manifest himself to be in a body at that moment. Harry wouldn't have seen him, but he was able to literally, and then the other, push Harry, so Harry reversed direction, save Harry's life, in other words. But the other thing is, this is where it's hard for us to hear this. These holy beings are capable of this for everybody. But what caused that was Harry's extraordinary exchanging for others, himself for others at that moment. So he created the cause to have Geshe Lama Konchog manifest to save his life, So I find that a very fascinating story. So so if we now go to the 6 perfections, as we started talking last week, the very first one, generosity, they say that the sign that you've perfected generosity is that you do exactly what Harry did. You'd give your life for another. So we at least know that Harry's got the perfection of generosity. He gave his body for another. But, he won the lottery and he got saved. So I find that a great example. Any questions about that? We've got 8 minutes to go, people. Any questions, people? Oops, a daisy. No questions, people. Nothing. Shock and horror. Disbelief. Yes, Carol. Yes.
It would seem to me that perseverance then is an essential quality in the practice. Can you speak a little bit about perseverance within the context of practice?
So now, of course. So that's, I think we got as far as patience when we're going to leap ahead to go to the 6 perfections. And I think perseverance is absolutely what we're going to go into next week. It's one of the most important. But let's start now.
Perfect.
Absolutely, Carol.
Okay.
Perseverance.
Great. Thank you.
It's incredible. Thank you. It's an incredible one. It's like, without perseverance, or joyful effort, they call it, or enthusiasm. These are words we understand. Enthusiasm, perseverance, we get them. But you hear joyful effort, sounds a bit peculiar. But that, of course, is what the bodhisattvas would have. That would be joyful for them. And what it is, the attitude of perseverance or enthusiasm or joyful effort is literally the attitude is, I will never give up. And this All the lamas would say, but forget about even in your practice. If you look in the world, in ordinary samsaric activities, we all can see the people we admire most are the ones who just persevere, pick themselves up, and they just keep going, and they just keep going. Not frantically, but never giving up on their goal, never giving up to achieve no matter how difficult things become, they never give up. And that's the quality. You can have bucket loads of generosity, morality, patience, even wisdom. But if you haven't got perseverance, all the lamas would say it, and this is talking about your practice, you will not succeed. So it's a hugely important practice. So Carol, just briefly mention it. We'll start here with a few minutes, and we'll continue on in depth next week. So, okay, the way to really understand what perseverance is very starkly, and how you cultivate it, is in understanding the opposite, the exact opposite. And shockingly, the opposite of enthusiasm is called laziness. But you listen, we will all recognize this. The first kind of laziness is simply called, I can't be bothered. Now, we have to analyze. So this, of course, we're only talking about practice here, dealing with the obstacles of your practice, the difficulties, the struggles, the dramas. But here, even if we just use this as an example in our ordinary daily activities, we will understand this. Technically, even enthusiasm in samsaric activities is not even enthusiasm. It's just another form of laziness. But it's an example we can really understand. We use it as like an analogy. So, you think of going to the gym, just going to the gym. Look at the effort we have to make. And this is the logic. What is the thing? Analyze it. What is the thing you can't be bothered doing? It's so obvious. It's the thing that you don't know how to do, that you haven't accomplished it. And so why is it difficult? Why does it take effort? It's because you don't know how to do it. But what is it that makes you want to can't be bothered is attachment. We are basically, the attachment here is the primordial attachment to be attached to be in our comfort zone, mentally or physically. We know it's terrifying to have to push yourself to achieve something. It really is painful. So I'm just talking ordinary analogy of ordinary samsara. You can be so inspired, to go to the gym, you think about it, you look at all the pictures, you look at your friends, you're all excited. You go to the gym the first night, you come home from work the next day, you go to the gym the second day. By the third day, you go, oh no, I can't be bothered. And you just sit back and put your feet up. Because it's painful to push yourself to go to the next level. That's why most of us don't achieve any goals, I'm talking, we try and talk real goals here, probably spiritual goals, because we can't be bothered. And then the next level, which is sort of part of the first one, the way they talk about it, but it's like a really crucial piece, is more tricky. It's very wicked. We lie to ourselves. The next level is, you see the job that has to get done. You see you got to go, and then we're talking again our spiritual practice, but let's use ordinary life as an example. You see the gym, and you go, within a millisecond, you go, no, I'm too busy. I'll do it later. So you think you get yourself off the hook. Just saying I can't be bothered is being very honest. But you say, no, I'm too busy. I'll do it later. It's the biggest lie on the planet. We know the greatest regrets we have, even in ordinary life, is putting off doing the things that we know we should do, or the things we really know we want to do. And this putting off happens in like a millisecond. It's so quick you don't even notice. And all you notice is, oh, it's okay. And you feel you got yourself off the hook because you say, I'll do it later. But later never, ever comes. This is the wickedest one. And again, what's the thing you say you're too busy to do? The thing you haven't prioritized, and you lie to yourself and say, I'm too busy. You're not too busy. You just haven't prioritized it. That's why you've got to really, like with your practice, the same. This is where it's the biggest suffering of everybody when it comes to practice. You come home from a retreat, you're all inspired, you do your morning practice. The second morning, you do your morning practice. And again, by the third morning, you wake up, you're tired, and you can't be bothered. Then you lie to yourself on top and say, I'll do it when I get home. I'll do it. And you feel relieved. You've got yourself off the hook. But it's a lie. You just can't be bothered. It can't be bothered, but you put it off, and this is worse. It's the worst one. And all the lamas say, in terms of practice, achieving your goals, doing that retreat, doing that study, learning that thing, memorizing. We're talking about our practice here now, but we can see it in our ordinary lives. The saddest way to die, they say, is to have this regret of your wasted life, your wasted opportunities. A friend of mine, she's the same age as me, it was very kind of chilling. We're both nuns, both Australian, she's the same age as me, and she died 5 years ago, cancer. And she said to one of her friends who was helping her die, all the regrets of my wasted life. I didn't do this, and I didn't study that, and I didn't do this retreat. Because you just get caught up in your life. Can't be bothered, I'll do it later, I'm too busy. Or literally will think, no, it's not possible, I can't do that retreat. I've got the kids, I've got the job, not possible, can't do it. But we're lying to ourselves. It doesn't mean you be cruel and selfish and just walk out on your family. But this is why it's so powerful, and this gets us to the next one as well. Okay, I'll say the next one as well, which is the worst laziness of all. And it's curious because it doesn't sound like laziness. We're going to go into more detail of these next week. This third one, the worst, is, oh no, it's not possible. I can't achieve that. No, I couldn't possibly achieve single point of concentration. No, I couldn't possibly memorize that text. No, I couldn't possibly go away for a month and do that retreat. Because the first thing that happens is we see the thing, and then we say, oh no, I can't do it. My wife won't approve, the kids won't approve, I can't do that, I haven't got the money. So what we've got to learn to do, this is a really powerful practice for all of us, is when you hear, let's say someone rings me up, Wolfgang rings me up, Robina, this is an amazing retreat in Paris next week, would you like to come with me? And you've got your wife and your kids and your job, or even whatever it is, even just yourself. And the first thing you think of, not possible. No, I can't do it. Not possible. No, I can't do it. So you just close the door to it. Whereas what you should practice thinking, I would love to do that. Let's see if it's possible. So you force yourself to look into the possibilities, and you might be surprised that you can put all the conditions together. So you've got to open the door to the possibility, because we can do it. And we're talking achieving Buddhahood, we're talking achieving realizations, we're talking about doing a retreat, we're talking about realizing emptiness, we're talking about doing that study, we're talking about whatever it might be in our practice. But I can't be bothered, I'll do it later, and anyway, I'm not capable, I can't. So we stay in our comfort zone and we just stay stuck, and before you know it, you're dead. I'm sure we all recognize all of these things I've just said. So we encourage to be honest with ourselves. And then to say, I want to do that. And that's the thing about when we understand karma. As Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish. And this is where we understand the mind. We've talked about this a lot. Or maybe not here, but we have, I think. When we understand the way the mind works, intention, not good intention, not like good motivation, but bare bones intention, volition, I will, that's running everything we ever do, even though we're mostly programmed with it. And so we've got to have the thought, I want to do that, I will do that, may I do that? And by having that thought, you sow the seed. You say, the first thing you say is, well, I would love to go to that retreat, Wolfgang. Even though you've got your job, your kids, your husband, you can't believe it, but you say, I would love to do that. Then you sow the seed, and then you open the door. And then you consider, is it possible? And you might be surprised that you could make it happen. But what we tend to say is, nah, can't do it. Not possible. Can't achieve it. Impossible. We're just lazy because it's too comfortable, So that we can see this is the most important thing. And as all the lamas say, the only thing you're going to have enthusiasm to do is the thing that you know the benefits of. So you've got to think through the benefits. And this is hard. We can see the benefits of giving up chocolate cake. We can see the benefits of going to the gym. We can't, very hard to see the benefits of practice, to achieve our spiritual goals. So we've got to really be very clear with ourselves, very honest, and then set our goals and then see if we can find the possibility. But even if we can't at this moment, I've got at least one friend I can think of who's a layman, and he got married and he's got children. He's now a grandfather. He's for years and years wanted to be a monk, but he's seeing the conditions aren't all there. So he doesn't just get depressed and say, oh, well, I can't be a monk. He says every day, may the conditions come so that I can be a monk. And that sows the seeds. So if I can't do that that retreat next week, I say, may I be able to do retreat? May I find all the conditions to do a retreat? May I find the conditions to do this and do that, or become a monk, and then you sow the seeds in your mind, and when the time is right, those conditions will ripen. Because everything exists on the tip of the wish. That'll do for today, people. Okay, Carol? We can talk more next week.
That was perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Okay, dearest people, thank you so much. Jung Chub, Semtrog Rinpoche. Let's just start the prayer. Good now. This one, so I'm going to say it in my words and you just do the little contemplation. So as a result of the virtuous karmic seeds we have planted in our mind by listening to these teachings, every millisecond we've been sowing seeds, may I quickly become a Buddha, just like we motivated, so that I can, in fact, lead every living being, without exception, into that enlightened state. That's the long-term goal. And then we make this aspiration, may this amazing, outrageous attitude of bodhicitta that has not arisen in the minds of others, may it arise and may it grow, and may that which has arisen in the minds of others, may it not diminish, but increase more and more. All right, precious people, thank you so much. See you all next week. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you, everybody, for asking your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you so much, everybody.
See you next
Bye.
week.
Have a good night.